Okay, things I wish somebody had told me as I was growing up before I knew it. Um, we don't all think alike. I don't mean cognitively different. I mean the mechanism by which we think is not the same because we didn't learn it the same way. The context of our life is different. So sometimes that has rather dramatic effect. We talk about people with dyslexia and that sort of thing. Those are sort of extreme, noticeable, symptomatic kinds of things. But most of us don't exactly think the same way everybody else does. We're individuals, and we've learned in different ways. So, my particular moment when it was dramatically presented to me that I don't think exactly like other people was I was a senior in seminary. We'd gone through 3 years, and in the seminary I was in, we did a senior thesis that we had to defend before the faculty. And it was the culmination of as we took courses, we would write out papers, 20-page papers, and then our thesis was really supposed to be a condensation of those three. It was an interesting seminary because it required you to be in ministry at the same time you were going to school. So you had some practical electricity to work off of as you were thinking about theological stuff. So I'm sitting there with the committee of 5 people, one of whom is a priest friend from, I'm an Episcopal priest, a priest friend who I've known for many years. He was just sitting in. He just a friend, I guess you'd say. And they started asking me questions, and I just kind of hummed and hawed, and I couldn't get it out, whatever it was. And so after about 15 frustrating minutes, one of the professors said, well, now, wait a minute. This isn't working, so we're going to do it a different way. Pretend that I'm Jesus and talk to me. So for about 45 minutes, I talked to him, laid out what I understood about him, what I hoped I knew who he was, and the theological things about him. I mean, there is a connection between theology, which means thinking God, studying God, and who we think Jesus is. So at the end of it, they were satisfied. They were later. I was talking to the priest friend, and he just sort of laughed, and he said it was amazing. They'd ask you a question, and you'd fumble around, and it was like you didn't know anything. And until a professor gave you a particular context, interpersonal context, then you can answer just. And that's pretty much how my ministry's been too. As I look back over it, it's been interpersonal. I was a hospital chaplain for some of my time, and my emphasis was on pastoral care as a clergy person. We all have our strengths and our weaknesses. My strength was pastoral care. Anyway, all I want to say in this particular thing is to say that we don't all think the same. That meaning that the process by which we arrive at things is different for each of us, depending on who we are. So, give yourself a break, and ask for help. Figure it out. There is the recognition that, particularly with reading, which is, after all, the most important thing about moving on in education. If you can't read, if they can't figure out what the coding, decoding problems you might have with reading, you can have a perfectly good life. It just, you can't have it in academia mostly. Well, anyway, that was my story about my sort of bumbling discovery of how I think. So I preach, but at the end of my preaching, in my sermons, I always ask for feedback. And I'm in a small congregation, and they're a bit timid, so they don't. But they speak up if they have something to say. And sometimes I don't finish. I lay out a particular thesis about what I'm talking, and and I forget to close it up at the end. So sometimes they close it up for me, or they ask me questions that helps me to close it up. Anyway, think about, discover what your particular way of thinking is, and realize that it's probably different from other people. If you're really successful academically, then you're probably thinking along the paths of academic success, which means you're thinking in the manner which people expect. But that doesn't mean you don't have these little peculiarities. Enjoy the hunt.